Hello, everybody. I'm Lucas Kendall, and this is my friend Charlie Vignola, and we're back for another hour. Charlie is freshly shorn.
Yes, I am.
And I am newly illuminated. I bought some cheap lights on Amazon, so you can actually see my
Perfect.
see my cold gray eyes this week. So we're going to dive right into Charlie. At my recommendation, just read the Frank Langella piece on Deadline about how he was fired, which he calls canceled. And do you have a take on that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting article.
We should summarize what happened.
Yeah, so basically, Frank Langella, veteran actor, was playing one of the lead roles in Netflix's adaptation of Fall of the House of Usher. Sounds like a limited series. And Frank was doing a scene where he was making love to his young wife. And I guess they had shot the scene. And right after that scene, the actress complained that he touched her leg in a place that was not previously agreed upon in the blocking of the lovemaking scene. Hollywood has these things called intimacy coordinators, which sounds like a really interesting job.
I'm glad. I'm glad that
you're doing this. Yeah, you have a job where basically it's, I guess you don't just leave it up to the actors to figure out how to block your lovemaking scenes. So I guess Frank went slightly off script, and the actress left the set, and Frank wasn't sure what was going on. And in very short order, Frank was told that this was a big problem because he had violated the blocking of the scene, which he thought was absurd because, again, he's a veteran actor. I don't know, he's probably in his like 70s or early 80s or something.
Okay. All right. Frank Langella is a great actor. Just ask him, he'll tell you.
He is, and he's famous for writing a tell-all book about like all of his romance.
Yeah, I see. First of all, it's like, who knows? And I am like, my radar goes up, like, don't say anything, because I don't want to be canceled if I make a joke or say the wrong thing. It's more than likely, my assumption is that it's a culture clash between an 84-year-old man who's used to a certain way of the culture treating women and a young actress who doesn't want to be treated that way.
It's a generational clash for sure.
Yeah, right? And I do, my own personal experience, we talked last week, I made that movie called Lucky Bastard, which was a micro-budget thriller on a porn set. We had a lot of nudity and a lot of foul language, which I had written, and a lot of intense situations. And we had some very brave actors and actresses doing frontal nudity, and that made me incredibly uncomfortable. I was engaged. I was about to get married, and I think everybody involved in the movie was either married or about to be. So there was no fun. Everybody was there to work, but it's like, it's like, okay, let's do the scene, and the girl's like, it's like, whoa. And we had close, when there was nudity, I wasn't on the set. And it was very professional, but it seemed like there was a lot of potential for abuse, and there was a lot of potential for somebody to get offended, and we shot 10 years ago last month.
So this is way before Me Too, when you were doing this. This is before.
Yeah, it's like a good 5-6 years before Me Too, but I was uncomfortable. Also, funny thing, we shot at a real porn house. Because we rented it, and people were confused what we were doing, and we wanted like a real porn house. And it's this house in Woodland Hills that really isn't a ton of porn. And they were rolling in the next porn shoot as we were rolling out, and like the guys who owned the house were kind of sketchy, and like they invited our actress to the pool party, and it was like, dude, this is a real actress. Don't talk to our actress. And it was just, fortunately, everybody we were working with was really cool, but I could easily see how somebody could rightfully be offended, and then all of a sudden we're all tarnished by this. And
well, it's interesting. Back when I was 18 years old, and I might have told the story before, I made some money during the summer being a background actor for films that were TV shows that were shooting in South Florida at the time. So these will date me. The two things I did were the first episode of Miami Vice, the very first episode ever, and the third sequel or the second sequel to Porky's called Porky's Revenge. So the scene was it was an opening dream sequence. It's a scene that opens the movie where Pee-wee, the rapscallion that the stories are based on, this little redheaded kid, who's actually he's a much older actor who was actually sleeping with every single background actress during the shooting of the movie. I think I could say that now. It's been many years ago. Anyway, at the time, it was a high school graduation scene. And it was a fantasy sequence. It was a dream sequence from this character. And the gag was that a hot foreign exchange student was walking on stage just as Pee-wee was getting his degree, and she flashed him. And he got an erection in front of the entire school. And as he was walking, a nail from the floor ripped his entire gown off, and he was naked before the entire school. That's the gag. So they had to shoot a shot of me. I was the lucky young man who was leaving the stage right before this actress came on and was going to do her nude scene. And she was at the time, she was a Playboy playmate. So they cleared the entire set for this. It was a huge, like I said, high school graduation, hundreds of people. And suddenly they let everybody go to lunch. So the only people on set were just the bare bones crew, the two leads, and me, because they had to match me leaving camera when she showed up. So I got to be there during the shoot. And even back then, 1988, it was, they were very careful about how they shot a nude scene. So I can only imagine how this gets ramped up. Did you have an intimacy coordinator on your film?
Oh, hell no. It was okay. It was a super cheap movie. We didn't even have an AD. Are you kidding?
Wow. So you did not have an intimacy. Okay. So in this case, when you read the article, and it's written by Frank Langella, he basically did an op-ed. It's an op-ed for the Deadline online website. And it reads like an older gentleman who's been acting for 50 plus years and has done many, many love scenes over the years, and maybe hasn't worked with an intimacy coordinator before and didn't think much of blocking to the inch where you touch an actress, and maybe she felt uncomfortable with it. Now, under normal circumstances, you would think this could be resolved pretty simply by simply saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. I didn't realize," whatever. In his op-ed, he's kind of unapologetic. He basically says it's absurd to have an intimacy coordinator. That I'm used to doing things a certain way, and I certainly, I didn't mean to make her uncomfortable or whatever it was, but sure enough, that was the domino that just sent everything going. And the scary thing is, he got fired from the show, and that's going to affect people hiring him now. And
he's done. He's done. He's 84.
He's 84, and so that's kind of a scary place to be. Like, if you're an actor and you're a working actor like Frank, and you're working all the time, and suddenly they say, "Nope, you're not going to work anymore" at age 84. Well, that's a scary place to be.
I am a fan of his. I mean, as Nixon, he was great. Frost Nixon, and I don't have the list in front of me, but yeah, I'm a fan. He's terrific. It's
played the bad guy in Dave, one of my favorites. Dave is great.
Right. I find it likely that there was more of a culture clash than he's talking about, because I also went back and read the original complaint, and probably. Look, I do understand the point. If you're filming a love scene, there's got to be, it'll be a better scene if there's some spontaneity. Right. And if everything is rehearsed, then it's making it much more difficult if he's got to remember his performance and remember my hand is allowed to go here, but not here. It sounds like, it sounds like a lot of not fun. And
also again, and this is a quibbling point because it is blocked, but she didn't say, "He touched my breast, he touched my buttocks, he touched my vagina, he touched my leg." Now, granted, maybe he touched my inner thigh, or I don't know where, but it could be one of those things where in his mind, I didn't do anything that I would think would be offensive because I didn't get near any of her intimate parts. But in her mind, it's probably very rigidly from this generation, no, we blocked it a certain way, and you violated that, and that's not cool.
I kind of think she doesn't I kind of think it's very likely he's just not a likable guy to a certain kind of person. You know, he's
No,
probably
I mean, he could be
smarmy.
cantankerous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
cantankerous, smarmy old guy, and she's like,
yeah,
I'm not taking this. And
right. But
it's
I guess
also,
what's
look,
oh,
you
okay.
call people honey or sweetie, your wife, your kids.
Yeah, my wife and kids. I don't think that I do that to people who are not my family members
Well,
or
it's
people
funny. Like,
close
I
friends.
mean, I would be, you ever be at a diner and the waitress calls everybody hun?
Yeah, but usually they're not in their 20s or 30s. They're in
Oh, I
their
know.
like
It's just
50s or 60s.
I have found myself saying this sometimes. Like, we had the kids had their friend over for a sleepover, and it's like, you know, I'm getting them, making sure they're okay at 9 at night, and I'm calling the other girl honey.
But your daughters are young girls.
My
They're not.
daughter's at 7.
Okay, so that your daughters are
The
not
point is,
18.
the point is that it's sometimes it is a vernacular that I would slip into with another, if I was making a joke or if I was just feeling, you know, casual with somebody. And you got to put on your professional hat and think, don't do that. And sometimes
But it's contextual, isn't it? It's
it is, yeah.
contextual. In other words, if you're using it with your daughter's 7-year-olds, that's probably different than if you're Frank Langella on a set with a 20-something actress. I mean, this was a joke in the original movie Tootsie. You know, it was a whole scene.
Let me put it this way. I think you're probably a fan of Don Rickles, right?
Everybody loves Don Rickles. Well, my generation liked Don Rickles.
I love
new
Don
generation would hate him.
He's hysterical. And
yeah,
you know, I would see he would do interviews, and his interviews are always hysterical with, if it's Dick Cavett or Merv Griffin or whoever. But he would say, like, it worked.
By the way, people, Dick Cavett and Merv Griffin were 20th century talk show hosts.
Thank you.
Lucas, you might want to mention.
Yeah, no, but he would say, like, you know, the people know I'm kidding, and they know that. And he was actually one of the most lovable, likable, friendly people. I mean, he was beloved, and so he could insult everybody because they knew it was joking. And he just said, like, there's sometimes people at a party where it's like, "Ooh, get that guy," you know, like, better take him home. But he could say anything. I mean, oh God, I can't even begin to.
But by the way, Don Rickles and Joan Rivers, like, I don't know what they were like when they were not on stage. They had a persona on stage. Not every comedian is the same off stage as they are on stage, right? Yeah. Robin Williams on stage and off stage.
Rickles, he could be. I don't know. He was just
like if he was on a talk show like Merv Griffin or Dick Cavett, like you just mentioned.
He goes in and out of sincerity. But the thing is, he could get away with this because there was just something about his vibe. You just knew when he was using all these racist jokes, you knew he was making fun of a person who is racist. He wasn't actually being racist. And so we just understood that.
Well, but again, it is contextual. On stage, that is what he does. That is his act. For instance, I'll give you an example. I don't know how in 2022, Trey Parker and Matt Stone of South Park still got grandfathered in and are allowed to make incredibly offensive jokes. I think Howard Stern would also be grandfathered in. Mm-hmm. There are a few key people in our culture that can still behave in ways that seem completely out of sync with these times.
Well, that's a good segue because Bill Murray just got in trouble.
Yeah, and I didn't hear what he did. I heard he was interviewed recently and he was kind of talking around it. And he said something about, like, he thought he was being funny, but clearly it wasn't interpreted as funny.
He was probably just being himself, and he was probably mocking somebody or making fun of somebody, and somebody took offense. And whereas the previous 50 years of his amazing career, it would just be, that's Billy being Billy. Somebody said, no, I'm not going to put up with this. And that caused a lot of other people who had been wounded by him to say, me neither. And so they shut down the show, it sounded like.
Yeah, I know someone who worked with Bill, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. And, you know, Bill's always been one of these actors who's hard to get in contact with. You know, it's very difficult to make sure that, you know, you don't even know if he's going to show up on your set when you hire him, but he shows up, obviously. But he's got a penchant for some behavior that doesn't fly with everybody. And I think over time, as times keep changing, that, people don't accept that as much as they used to. And if you're an actor or a comedian of a certain age, you're starting to see that there is a big generation gap in terms of what the kind of jokes you used to be able to tell. Chris Rock and Jerry Seinfeld complain that they can't even play colleges anymore because so many of the jokes that they think are second nature are interpreted as offensive by 20 somethings. And I have a 21-year-old daughter, and so do many of my friends. And I'm frequently surprised by their opinions about like what you can and can't joke about, kind of certain words that have a different connotation now that I thought nothing of, but now mean a lot more. And so
I would.
we used to use, when somebody did something stupid, we would use the R word.
R word, yeah, I know about that. Yeah.
We would use the R word, and to us, and you see this in a lot of 80s movies, it's like,
wow. My childhood in the 80s, we had a childhood playground game called Smear the Queer. And I'm just using that as an historical reference. I'm not proud of that, but I will go live on our show saying that as a matter of historical record, we in the playground in the 80s had a game called Smear the Queer. And it was whoever had the ball, everybody else tried to beat on them. And then the ball would go flying and somebody else would pick up the ball and you'd all scream the name of the game and then they try to get the next one. I figured out, I was the smallest kid in the class, I figured out just don't touch the ball.
Yeah, so I was going to say, who would want to touch the ball in a game where everybody beats you up when you grab the ball?
But I mean, I'm not homophobic, and I'm not going to prove my bona fides on that because it's ludicrous. But just as for whatever reason, that's the reference that I thought, and I find it a little weird if I was too afraid even to reveal the name of the game.
Well, again, it's contextual. Yeah. People in the LGBTQ community, I think that's all the letters right now, right? They have taken back the word queer to be a word that they use to sort of express themselves. So they've kind of tried to bleed it or appropriated it, for their own purposes. Same thing if you're African American, if you're Chris Rock on stage or if you're a rapper, you can use the N-word because contextually that's okay. They're appropriating it in their own terms. You can't use it if you're white, I think, at all anymore. I think somebody got fired from the New York Times because they wrote an article in which there was a quote from somebody else using the N-word that was in the article. They got fired. So
that sucks. There should be a reasonable exception for art and scholarship. That's just obvious. But I'm not about to push the boundary on that one.
Well, the question is who gets to judge that, right?
I used it in a script. I had a black character use that word in a script as a joke upon the use of the word. And I was worried as a white writer if I'd be in trouble. But then I said, I don't care.
Well, here, this is interesting. So I think we might have talked about this in another show. I have a movie idea that I'm working on that has black characters and they're pretty prominent. And, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have thought anything of just like writing the screenplay myself. I don't think that is appropriate now. I don't think that it would be seen as appropriate, and I don't feel appropriate about it. So I know that if I want to work on that story, and I like the story a lot, I think I would have to find a co-writer of color to work on that idea with, to feel comfortable about it, because I don't think that it would be cool for me to do that now. And so I'm definitely kind of policing myself, and I don't have a problem with it because I understand that, for the 100 years of entertainment prior to now, white guys got to tell all the stories. And so now there is much more awareness in the business about trying to have more diverse voices. Now, I'm hearing from a lot of friends in my age group and my ethnicity as a white guy, that is a problem in terms of some of them getting work in modern Hollywood, because modern Hollywood is trying to hire more people of color, more people of, sexual diversity, things like that. Now, the amount of material that's being developed has never been bigger because of all the streaming platforms and all that kind of stuff. But I've definitely heard a lot of stories from a lot of people like myself that it's like it's harder, and they're actually hearing from people who are hiring that, like, yeah, that is a consideration now. Some of my friends are more concerned about it. Some of my friends are more I don't want to say angry about it, because again, I'll say it, I'm a liberal Democrat. I work in Hollywood. You could probably have guessed that. And so most of my friends are liberal Democrats. But in hearing some of them talk about these concerns, it's interesting in the sense that you start to get a sense of, like, there is a constituency for Donald Trump, people who feel like America is changing, and in a way that makes them feel more alienated from the country they grew up in. And in some of the friends that I have in the business, you're starting to get like a little undercurrent or a little sense of, like, even people who are sympathetic towards changing times starting to feel like, oh, this is coming to affect me now in a way that's affecting my ability to get work, my ability to sort of pay my bills, that kind of thing. And they're still sympathetic. They're still very much interested in diversity, and they'll still put their money where their mouth is, and they'll vote that way. But it's a real, it's a real issue for some people. So for the people who are less sympathetic towards those people who are now seeing their stories told in Hollywood, obviously there's a whole other side of America who's angry about that, who's angry about, like, they're, the Archie Bunkers of the world. And Archie Bunker is a great character, right? You and I grew up with All in the Family, and we loved Archie, and he was so funny, but he represented a genuine point of view for like millions of Americans about a changing America, to an older generation that Frank Langella now belongs to, right? He's part of this older generation who's seeing the country and the culture change, sometimes in ways that you're trying to get on board with,
I think the lesson for Frank Langella should be, you can't get away with touching your co-star's thigh if you're known for being Skeletor.
Yes, I forgot he did play Skeletor.
Although you've said some of the actors who play villains are the sweetest people ever.
Yeah, we've talked about this. It's like, the people who play the heroes are generally the biggest douchebags, and the people who play the villains are the kindest.
I know. I remember Carrie Fisher saying that Peter Cushing on Star Wars, like, he smelled like lavender. He was like the most charming.
Like lavender.
Yeah,
that's fascinating. By the way, the thing about the younger generation and what they think we should or shouldn't be writing, like, a friend of mine who's a fellow writer also has a 21-year-old daughter, same age as my daughter. And we had this very long conversation about, she didn't even think I should be writing stories from a female perspective at all, like a female character at all. Like, I couldn't write a movie about a woman.
Yeah, there's something weird going on. Is your daughter insufferable, or is she kind of cool?
No. I mean, she's my daughter is I would say she's progressive, but she's a moderate. She's not like a bomb throwing progressive like some of her friends. And she went to Emerson in Boston, and some of her friends at Emerson, I think, are much more progressive and left to a degree that she is not. But I think that she's educated herself, and she's just graduating from college now, and has learned more about these issues. Has become much more articulate and thoughtful about them in ways that you could see why certain conservatives don't like, institutions of learning, because when your mind is open to all of these different perspectives and you start to question the orthodoxy you were raised with, whether it's religion or cultural things, they hate that, which is the reason why they try to tell people, don't go to college, just go get a welding degree. You're just as fine as if you would have gone to study in school.
It is weird that kids are like so uptight about the guest speakers. I was at Amherst in the mid-90s, and I remember my group of friends, like, we actively sought out the gnarliest, most offensive, most insane movies, readers or speakers. Like, it was like, hey, there's a Nazi talking. Oh, cool. It was like, or we would thought, I don't want to go see a Nazi, but it would never occur to us to like protest. It was like, oh yeah, of course. First Amendment, let the Nazis talk, and then they'll come and say all their racist stuff, and we'll go, what a jerk, and then that'll the sunlight is the best disinfectant. But as far as movies, we wanted like the gory stuff, the offensive stuff, the crazy stuff. It was like, give it me, give it to me harder. When Pulp
Yeah,
Fiction
I agree.
came out, we
I
thought that
agree.
was,
We when we were teenagers, we sought out because we were rebellious.
yeah.
We sought out transgressive, whether it was music, whether it was movies. I remember I grew up in South Florida in the mid to late '80s, and I remember my brother, who was 3 years younger than me, introducing me to Two Live Crew. This was when Two Live Crew hit the scene with the song "Me So Horny,"
Mhm.
which is, it samples a line from Full Metal Jacket
Sure.
that a prostitute is saying to one of the soldiers.
Yes, we
And
know.
this became a huge rallying cry for the American right. In fact, and not just the right, Tipper Gore, Al Gore's wife, was
Yeah, I
famous
remember that.
for trying to get this rap song banned. So these young black teenagers from Florida that were rising up the charts with their music became the sort of avatars for free speech, the way that Larry Flint became an avatar for free speech. By the way, any of you out there, that's a great story. If you want to do the Two Live Crew story by way of Larry Flint and by way of Straight Outta Compton, there is definitely a mini series or a movie to be made out of this subject matter.
But you
So
can't write it.
consider that. It's a great story. It's a really interesting story. But as teenagers, that's what we did, and nowadays the kids are a lot different. My son and his friends, they didn't get their driver's licenses as soon as they could. We got it at 15, 16. As soon as we can get that driver's license, we could. And my
Mhm.
son didn't get his driver's license until he was like 21. Like, he didn't care. He just, he and his friends played video games. They just hung out at home, and they didn't go and ride their bikes all over the place and get into all these crazy Stand By Me kind of adventures. I'm sure you and I did that when
Yeah,
we were kids,
yeah.
right?
I mean, I lived in a house it was at the end of a dirt road on Martha's Vineyard in West Tisbury, and we had a neighborhood friend, and she would come and we'd ride our bikes and we'd pretend we were the Dukes of Hazzard. I was Luke, my brother was Bo, and our friend was Daisy. And my mom would open the door and scream, "Dinner!" And then we'd run out of the woods and come to dinner.
I think it's brilliant that a young Jewish teenager, was playing Dukes of Hazzard. The sort of Southerners that probably wouldn't reckon you were kind, and it's just we didn't think about those things when
Oh
we
yeah,
were
the
kids.
car with the General Leaf, the Confederate
With a
flag.
Confederate flag on it,
I know.
exactly. It's like,
And that's not a good thing. It's
no,
just,
I'm saying, like,
yeah.
we didn't think of these things back when we were kids, because again, it was part of the culture of that generation. We talk about this when, I saw Animal House when it came out, in 78, 79, and it was on, HBO. And, back then, I didn't think anything of the fact that the hero of the story was in his like frat room with like a drunk girl and considering having sex with her when she was like unconscious.
Yeah.
And then later on in the episode, in the movie, when they're on the football field, she tells him, "I'm only 13 years old." This is the hero of the story. "I'm only
Yeah.
13 years old," and he sleeps with her. And in the very end of the movie, I hope I'm not spoiling this movie for anybody, but at the end of the movie, the hero of the movie comes with the girl and to her parents and says, "We've got to get married," because she's pregnant. So that's the hero of Animal House, which I find fascinating. That it's still a big movie and a legendary comedy, but by modern standards, that behavior is atrocious. Even what Tim Matheson does to the girl lying about like being the fiance of the dead girl, so
Yeah.
he could cop a feel in the car, and
Well,
the joke.
Mad Men was a cultural phenomenon for exploiting this. People thinking that's crazy, but that's just how it was.
Yeah, but part of America wants to return to that era, right? Isn't that like what not fully half of America, but probably 38 to
No, well, they're
40%
going to
of the
find out
country.
the hard way that they can't. I mean, this is becoming political now, but this whole Roe v. Wade thing is so
I'm,
upsetting.
I'm not even talking Roe v. Wade so much as I'm talking about like the truth of the matter is culture in America always evolves, right? If it didn't evolve, women would still not be able to vote, we'd still have slavery, all these things change over time. And the argument is always between how quickly it's changing. There are people who don't like the fact that it's changing at the speed with which it's changing. And those are people who generally want to keep the status quo.
Yeah, like
And then,
Frank Langella.
right, exactly, like Frank Langella. And that's an entire, again, generation of not just actors, but Americans who kind of don't understand this. And again, if you read Frank's article in the Deadline Hollywood, I understand his perspective, but I also understand where he went wrong, which is basically saying, like, I don't respect this new way of making scenes in Hollywood where you have to block out all the lovemaking. I don't think that works for me. But guess what? You're not doing the scene by yourself. You're doing the scene with a 20-something actress who's part of the scene. And if her understanding is, you can touch me here, 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 but not here, 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 and you go, I'm going to do whatever, you can't do that. And
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that actress from day one had been told, watch out for this guy.
I don't know who the actress is. He says in the article that it was mentioned who
Yeah,
it was.
I couldn't find out. I guess
I don't know who it is.
Plays his wife. We'll find out eventually, but
it doesn't even matter.
It doesn't matter. But yeah, people have reputations, and I'm sure that there was a certain word like, keep an eye on this guy because he's going to be chummy, he's going to be controlling, he's going to be kind of passive aggressive, and then look out, you're going to have a hand on your butt. What are you talking about? I was just put my hand in.
Let's circle around to how this affects screenwriting, because the thing is, this is part of, what is it okay to write about? I think our imaginations should be unfettered. I think we should be able to write about anything. But I think that there is a new generation coming up that doesn't feel that way. For instance, I had a conversation with my daughter about this, and I said, so if I came up with an idea for, let's say, a slave in the Civil War who was psychic and could see the future, and that's the story I wanted to tell. You can't write that, she said. I can't? No, you can't. Why? Well, because you're not Black. And that should be something that's told by a Black writer. I'm like, but it's a genre story. It's like, it's science fiction, fantasy, horror. It's a, thriller. So are you basically saying that now I can't write any protagonist who's not a white male? I can't write a woman. I can't write a Native American lead. I can't write, a Black queer lead if I want that. No, I mean, like, there is definitely like, and I'm not saying all people of this generation feel like this, but there definitely is a sense of you should be careful what kind of material you write. And I do understand it on a certain level. Like, for instance, the Issa Rae show, Insecure, which I've talked about before on HBO Max. I love that show. Yeah, we love it's not something I would write, and I probably should not write it, and I would never be able to make it as authentic as she has made it, the creator of that show. But there's something a little just conceptually chilling to me about being told you can't write that. Don't even think about writing that. There are now boxes, there are now borders that you as a creative writer cannot think about writing about, because if you do, you're going to be treading on somebody else's creative territory, and therefore you might be regarded askance, or you'll have a harder time selling that material. Here's a good example. Terms of Endearment, right, is a story about women written by men. Larry McMurtry wrote the original book that it's based on. James L. Brooks wrote and directed the movie. Could you do that now? You probably could do it, but it would be frowned upon. You'd probably want a female writer director to tell that story in modern 2022 and 2023 Hollywood. You, Lucas, probably wouldn't write that story about two women. And this frustrates me to some degree, because I actually do have some story ideas about women that I now have to check myself and go, geez, can I write this? I think I have a good idea, but can I write this?
A bunch of things with women protagonists, and
right. So is that changing?
Take my chances.
Yeah, so you feel like you can do that, right? You feel like you can write that.
I got much bigger problems. The bigger problem for me is it any good? You know, it's like,
Right.
um,
Right. So you're less worried about like the cultural reactions to what you write so much as like, is it
can't
any good?
control
Because
can't control it. I just can't control it.
right,
But
right,
I would like to have the chance of people actually like it. And if they met me, they would see that it comes from a good place. Um, and I'm an insufferable prick. And what else? What's the problem? I'm making a joke. I may be insufferable, but I try to be a good person. Don't always get there, but I really do try. And it's I mean, I'm glad that I'm glad there's more diversity. I'm glad that there's an effort to balance a lot of very unfair practices. And as usual, there's a lot of unfair practices that continue, and then there's a lot of herd mentality that takes things too far in the other direction. I was told by a manager point blank he wouldn't even read a pilot of mine because he's only trying to sign women and minorities in television for staffing.
right,
And so,
right.
hey, bro, it's your business. I don't know. It's yeah.
But are you offended by that? Does it
No,
make
no,
you angry, or
no,
like
it
me?
doesn't make. I don't get angry. I get evil.
Yeah, I when I talk to my friends who, like some of my friends are more on the side of like, this is not fair to us.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, but at the end of the day, if you write a great piece of material, and I still believe this, it will find a home. Like if it's truly great,
Yeah.
it's going to find a home one way or another. So you can say that your lack of success or your inability to sell your screenplays is based on some sort of Hollywood woke sensibility that's only interested in you if your name is Cleopatra Muhammad or
Whoa.
something like that, but no, I mean, I'm saying like that is this is the kind of the attitude that some of these people have, which is it's a joke, but kind of not really, that they say, anybody of a certain color or a certain diversity or a certain you know could walk in and get a deal at Netflix. And I'm like,
Well,
guy, that's
yeah.
not true.
People,
That's such BS.
there are
That is not
hacks.
true.
There are hacks up and down the entertainment business, as writers, as directors,
Yeah.
as executives. There are hacks who have no imagination, who follow trends, and who overcompensate. I do think it's true that junior executives will push material that has a noble cause because it's easier to identify a noble cause than a great script. If you say this is a great script and people go, no, it sucks, we all read it, then, and they probably didn't know the difference, then they're an idiot. But if it's a good cause, you can say, yeah, but it's a good cause. So it's a safety thing as far as the food chain.
But it's also like whatever, how Hollywood follows trends.
Yes.
Right. And no matter what it is, if there's a big romantic comedy that's a success, then everybody wants to do that. If there's a big, young adult story that's popular, then they want to track that. If it's Die Hard, they'll do 20 Die Hard ripoffs. Well, right now, if diversity is what's selling to Hollywood, and if those are the things, the movies that they want to make, the TV shows that they want to develop, then great. Then it's a good opportunity for people who are diverse writers to kind of find their voices and try to sell to Hollywood, because they sure as hell didn't have that opportunity for 95% of the history of Hollywood.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I think I believe in the meritocracy, and the problem being is that here's why I'm not upset. I do believe in the meritocracy, but the meritocracy is as unfair in a different way as other things, because I was lucky to be born to a doctor who spent his life on Martha's Vineyard. So I grew up as a doctor's son of Martha's Vineyard with a lot of privilege and a lot of resources. And then I went to Amherst College, which has, one of the elite liberal arts colleges in America. And between, all of these advantages afforded to me, I could spend 20 years making film music CDs without a lot of attention to, I didn't have student debt. I didn't have mouths to feed. I had an emergency valve. If I said, Dad, I think I screwed up and I need 40 grand, I'll get it back to you in a year. I could do that, which is not something
right.
that people can do. So I was born with all these advantages. I'm neither, I'm honest about it. I don't think to whom would I even apologize? It's just the fact of what it is. Between the Martha's Vineyard Network and the Amherst Network, I mean, I've had a lot of opportunities just to cold call people. I used to meet people because my dad saw them at the emergency room, or he was giving them an
That's an
my dad
interesting
would give
network.
an insurance physical to Doug Lyman. I don't know if this is a HIPAA violation for me to say something. My dad's retired, but he'd say, hey, I just had to get a, you know, they'd have to get a physical for insurance for the next movie, and they'd be in Martha's Vineyard, and my dad would do it. And he had pictures in his office of artwork I had made as a little kid, and, you know, like album covers and stuff about his kids. And so if they said they were in the movie business, he'd go, oh, my kid is in the movie business. And when I was 19, it was a pretty easy way for them to say, oh, have them call me and I'll have lunch. And I went to, there was a guy, Silver, what's his first name? Casey Silver. Casey Silver.
Okay.
Who was
big shot.
At a Universal.
Yeah.
My dad met him, and I went out and had a meeting with him in Santa Monica. It was like I was 23. You know, I was in no position to, I was not writing at the time. If I called him now, it means nothing. But, you know, I grew up swimming in Carly Simon's pool.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So you have, so I think that what you're saying is that everybody has their, you know, advantages and disadvantages. Some have more than others, but it's about playing the hand you're dealt.
The meritocracy is the best system, in that the theory being everybody should be able to succeed according to merit. And then you're not penalized by who you are, but people are penalized by who they are based on who they're born to. The people of the higher class have more advantages economically, and so they have more opportunities to do things. And
this is the difference in philosophies, I think, between the political parties, right? There's one political party that sees that there are iniquities in our society and think that government should be used to change them to benefit more people. And then there are people who don't want to have the government intrude in our society. They want them to be at a distance so that we can do whatever we want to do. The less supervision, the better. The less intrusion, the better. This is a major philosophical difference.
Well, the biggest philosophical difference is one of, there's a party of reason and there's a party of dogma, you know, as you know. And it's
or faith versus reason. But yeah, I mean, yeah,
it's a cultural tribe. So there's the tribe of the people who are united based on their identity, and there's this other tribe of people based on a different kind of identity, being a common beliefs in solving in liberal politics as far as openness and inclusivity and plurality and diversity. And
but then what it really comes down to, what it really comes down to is change is the key word, right? If you're in favor of keeping things the way they are, the status quo, then you belong to one side. And if you're okay with change, things changing, you belong to the other side. That's what it really comes down to.
Right, because as things change, there are always people who are adapting, and the people who don't adapt because it's not the resources they have, or it's not who they are that's sort of within them. And if the people who are being left behind are not talked to with respect, or with a tone of just humanity,
like respect,
they're going to go to demagogues, which they have.
Yeah, and I think, like, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, which is, like, you know, there's a common humanity. Like, I noticed that there's an attitude certain older people have where I lived a hard scrabble, miserable life, right? And therefore, I think everybody should have to go through that, because nobody gave me anything. I had to work so hard to, you know, get everything that I got. Screw everybody. I don't want to help anybody out. I want to make things as difficult for everybody else as
I wonder how it happened if politicians were more like, you know, you're right, you were not treated fairly, and we didn't listen to you, and we're asking you for another chance.
Yes, and I think that's if you're not doing well in life, right, for whatever reason, you want to find somebody to blame it on, other than you, because, like, if you blame it on yourself, where do you go with that? You're just miserable, you're depressed, and you're angry. So a demagogic politician comes along and says, I know who you can blame, this, that, or the other person. It's
Yeah,
not your fault. It's somebody other than you.
I
And
hate
of
that
course,
so much.
those are simple solutions. And the problem is the world is not really a simple place. But people who come along with simple answers thrive, because if your life stinks, you want to hear that there's a simple answer to that.
Mhm.
Oh, and that leaves people very vulnerable. And I think there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. We might have talked about this. I don't know.
I
The
forget.
Dunning-Kruger effect is a psychological thing. The simplest version to describe the theory is that ignorant people don't have the capacity to know how ignorant they are. They just don't know. The smarter you are, the more you know about the world, the more you realize you don't know, that there's so much to know that you actually realize, okay, I have to be humble about what I know and don't know, because I'm so smart, I recognize there's a whole universe that we don't understand. But if you're not smart, if you're not learned, and you think that the world is black and white because you're just,
Why don't we
you're
run
not.
for office instead of all these turkeys talking about pronouns?
But it's interesting to me, because it's like that does drive things, which is, I think that if you're, if there's definitely a divide, like a gap between people who are like more academic and more and less educated. There's a huge gap, right? And so this is why people on one side are leery of expertise, right? I don't want to have to listen to scientists. I don't want to have to listen to doctors and academics. I know as much as they do. It's like, yeah, but you don't, because if you get sick, you're not going to like go diagnose it yourself. You're going to go to an expert unless you're really, really dumb.
It's, and all these guys have, the guy who fixes cars knows that people can't come off the street and say, here's how you fix your car. It's like, dude, I've been fixing cars for 40 years.
Exactly.
I used to play baseball with these guys. They all liked me. So I wasn't a phony.
and you were funny. I'm sure that they kept
Well,
you
I don't
around.
know. I mean, they liked me because I got on base a lot. But I remember there was a guy, Scotty, who was to the right of Attila the Hun. This guy had some pretty out there opinions, and he was managing the team one day because the manager was there, and the other team was taking infield, and it was our turn to take infield. The other team was taking so long. I remember saying, "Hey, Scotty, how come you can fix the tax code for a country of 250 million people, but you can't get the other team off the infield?" But the guy laughed, because they could make fun of me too.
But isn't the great thing though about what we're doing as storytellers is that, if you tell a story right, it doesn't matter what the character is or what the world is. You can find something universal about it, so that like somebody who's not from that world could experience it vicariously. I mean, an example like Slumdog Millionaire was a great film, right? And it was like it was telling the story about a young kid from India, and for a little while, for that hour and 50 minutes that you were in his world, you connected with him and you sympathized with him and you understood what he was going through. And like I think that's one of the great things, not just about screenwriting but about art in general, is that you're able to universalize a specific character or event or world in a way that allows people to empathize, to sympathize, right? I mean, one way or another, either it's emotionally or viscerally, if it's a thriller, something like that. But it's a delivery vehicle for an emotional experience, more or less.
Yeah, I think a thought I had to finish is that I do think if Roe v. Wade is overturned as drastically as that draft opinion, the Republicans are going to be the dog that caught the car, and they might really get blown out. I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll really have to see. But the severity of the consequences of banning abortion and what it does to family and women, and just the individual horror stories, the grotesqueries that will come out about what will happen to people. It's gonna, the left is bad at a lot of things, but we're good at making movies.
We're good at making movies, but we're bad at political messaging. But
we are bad at political messaging. They all want to give facts. It's not. How come we're so good at making movies? We can't just talk. And
Yeah,
unfortunately,
Madison Avenue is run by people who are creatives, right? I mean, the entire advertising business is run by creatives. Obviously, most of the media is run by people who are progressive. But at the end of the day, what did the other side, conservatives, just built their own ecosystem? They built their own podcasts and radio stations and television stations and academic journals, and
I
so
know.
they have an entire infrastructure that
But
they've been building.
I was wondering when the fever would break, as Obama said, like at some point the fever is going to break, because the right has been completely taken over by their fringe.
Mhm.
Just truly insanity, a true insanity, like impractical policies that they're now really going to do. I mean,
You're talking about like the belief in things like QAnon. In other words,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
a
the QAnon
large.
people, it's total, it's just total nonsense. There's a complete disconnection from any semblance of governance. And and I thought that COVID, my wife knew, no, no, no. I said, if people are actually dying, if they don't get the shot, won't they go, let's get the shot? But no, they still would, that still didn't do it. They would rather die than get the shot.
It wasn't just that. I think they believed in those conspiracy theories.
They
They
do,
believed
they really do. But I think this road could be different, because if you're taking a right away from, I mean, every woman in this country of reproductive age has lived with the right to an abortion.
right.
And if you're going to take that away from half the population, you've always got the Phyllis Schlafly's, crazy, sort of crazy, very revanchist women. But I think most of them are like,
Revanchist. What a good word. Revanchist.
I hope I said it right.
That, yeah, you did.
But it's damn it, Charles,
I
on a roll.
I agree. This is a big issue, but like symbolically, what it is again is it's a fight against change. It's a fight against
Yeah.
our culture evolving, right? Like for the 180 years or whatever before Roe v. Wade, abortion was still going on in America. It just wasn't legal, right? It was just like underground, or
well,
it was.
Yes, it changes the discussion from like, is abortion bad? I mean, no, who likes abortion?
Nobody does. I think that the people.
Who more abortions? I mean,
I think the right thinks that the left holds abortion parties, like teenage girls just to be activists, get pregnant just so they can have an abortion.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like it's kind of
It's
But what's really
they're so extreme to not have to not allow exceptions for rape or incest. But I understand why, because then there's this all going to be this kabuki dance of like, well, it might be a rape. I mean, how do you, who's now the rape police? Oh, he was officially called a rape,
Yeah.
so you can get this abortion. It's just the intrusiveness and the cruelty. And I just think people are gonna, if the Democrats have any wits about them and any political skills to be able to say that these people are crazy and they want to police your bodies and overthrow the government, and you can't trust them, and you gotta stick with us. We're not perfect, but we're not crazy.
Well, this is where I think this is where it comes down, right? It comes down to whose body is it at the end of the day?
Yeah, of course, obviously, yes.
Is it your body, and do you have dominion over whatever is growing inside of it? Not just a fetus, but a virus, a bacteria, anything that's an alien thing growing inside of your body. Do you have the right to say, I want it to grow or not want it to grow? Or does the government have the right to say, I want it to grow or not want it to grow?
There was always a compromise that the fetal viability, whatever that number of weeks is, like we don't.
It's first trimester or something, isn't it? Like,
the first trimester is okay, and second trimester is where the fetal viability happens. Third trimester, right, like late term abortions, and then I don't want to talk about this. I'm not an expert, and it's just sickening, the cruelty and how much it'll hurt people.
Well, I think it's
sad. It makes me angry and sad.
It is, as a person who's married and who has a daughter, it concerns me greatly to believe my daughter doesn't have bodily autonomy, or could not have bodily autonomy or individual liberty. Now, if you believe And if you're not a believer in abortion and you're absolutist and you say it's about murdering a baby, right? If that's your bottom line, is it doesn't matter how you dress it up, it doesn't matter what language you use, you're murdering a baby. And you'll never change their opinion about that. And that is fine. The answer to that is, I would say, you know, we go to war when we need to. You know, we kill people. We have capital punishment in America when we need to. Yeah, but that's somebody who committed murder, not an innocent baby. Great. What I'm saying is, we take life all the time as a government. We go and innocent people are killed in war all the time. Children and mothers are killed in war all the time. And we brush that off because we're like, well, we had to attack that country. They're harboring terrorists. So you know what? Oh, well, if there's innocent women and children in that country, then that's just too bad. It's like, no. At the end of the day, we're talking about a principle. And if the principle is you believe that life is sacrosanct, then you should be against the state killing people in capital punishment. You should be against war. You should be against those things too. The fact that you pick and choose when it's convenient for you is the problem I have. Because at the end of the day, you want to be absolutist, that's absolutist. Either only God takes life, or if you're saying, that the state can take life, then we're just picking and choosing in what circumstances it's okay to do so. Beyond that, I'm also a practical person who says, okay, we live in a country where we have 400,000 kids in foster care today who can't find homes. 400,000 children. You want to get rid of abortion, you want to criminalize it tomorrow? Great. Let's talk about practically what we would now have to face. There's about 800,000 abortions in America every year. If it's outlawed tomorrow, that means there'll be 800,000 children unwanted born into America every single year going forward, period. You can't find homes for 400,000 that are in foster care now. You're going to add double that every year indefinitely. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to now figure out how to feed, clothe, shelter, vaccinate, educate all of those children that are born that are unwanted every single year now. The average cost of raising a child in America to the age of 18 is about $275,000. Do the back of the envelope math. 800,000 unwanted kids times $275,000.
Yeah, stats don't
every single year. That's going to be a new added burden on society. Where's that money going to come from?
You stats never convince anybody, Charlie.
I know. I'm just saying, like, this is the reality. If you're going to change the country, this is the country that you're going to have to face. And I know that you're just saying, well, theoretically, I don't like killing babies, and I get that, fine. But to change the world the way you want, there's going to be practical consideration. What are you going to do about miscarriages? Are you going to start having?
It's going to have to be an investigation every time, right?
Every single miscarriage is going to have to be investigated as a possible abortion.
They're going to.
It's scary when you think about it, but that's this is what you're facing. Yeah.
And I do have daughters, and I have a wife, and it is disgusting to have the government intrude. But I felt this way even before I was married.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, I was always like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
They'll just find out the hard way that people hate this, and they're going to lose a winnable election. I hope. I don't know. I really worry that if the next Republican president, it's going to be the end of democracy, because they're going to win at some point, and if they don't believe in democracy, they're just going to start dismantling our democracy, which is what Trump tried to do, and thank God he was so incompetent.
Yeah, but this new generation of politicians are going to be a little smarter and learn from the mistakes of the last couple of years, presumably, right? And that's what we're going to be facing. These. Boy, do we get off of?
I mean, we're screenwriting. We should just have a culture
writing today. But you know what?
Did you hear the sound of the guys sawing outside?
Oh no, I did not. Over by you, I did not hear.
Yeah, no. They're fixing the patio.
Well, again, maybe we can circle around and basically say everything that we're talking about right now, these are issues that could make for interesting stories, interesting films, interesting TV series, these cultural shifts, these kind of like changing America. I remember a few years ago that there was somebody was developing like a Second American Civil War TV series, like set in modern day.
That got canceled by the Thrones guys.
Right, exactly. The
Yeah.
game. Well, actually, that was different. That was the Game of Thrones guys were working on a TV series about what if slavery had never been.
Oh yeah, all right,
Uh,
that's what I'm thinking.
that's different. This was about a civil war in modern America. But those are stories that are waiting to be told, and and all these other issues. There was, what was it called? Unpregnant. There was like a story about like two young girls. It was a road trip movie where one of them accidentally got pregnant. They were making their way to a place where the girl could get an abortion. That was a movie, and it was actually kind of funny and kind of touching, and it was really well done. So there are stories to be made here. These are hot button issues, but you know what? If you're a storyteller, you look for interesting stories to tell, and all these things are important. By the way, Ben Shapiro, you know who he is, right? Okay, Ben Shapiro is starting his own Disney for conservatives, because when Ron DeSantis decided to punish Disney for having the temerity to speak out against alienating and otherizing, LGBT youth in Florida, he decided he's going to punish Disney. So Ben Shapiro, the opportunist that he is, and I'm not using that in a bad way, I'm just saying he sees an opportunity, says, well, you know what? The Daily Wire, my media empire, we're going to create conservative programming for conservative families who want their children to watch not woke and not diverse children's programs.
Entertainment sucks.
But he's going to do it.
No, I want to make a serious point. Conservative entertainment, unless it's a certain kind of like war movie, it sucks.
Now, what's an example? Would an example be Dennis Miller's comedy routines when he became more conservative? Did they become less funny?
It's just mean-spirited.
Right. Okay.
It's like sexist jokes, and I hear that Gutfield show on Fox is lame. It's just like, it's for Archie Bunkers to go, yeah, dumb women. I mean,
right now, but now, All in the Family in the 70s was the biggest show on television, right? And the main character of that show was, a Republican.
I understand that. My point is that what makes, unless it's one of those right-wing action movies like Rambo, which are super right-wing, and where
or Dirty Harry. Dirty Harry is very
so there's a certain kind of right-wing entertainment that works. It's about manly men killing worse men. But if it is any kind of drama, or God forbid, a comedy, what makes these things work is empathy. It's always empathy. It's always the empathy for the oddball, the underdog,
okay,
the outcast, the woman.
So how do you feel about The Searchers, the John Wayne movie?
I love The Searchers.
That's a very right-wing movie, right? I mean, Ethan is coming home, Civil War hero, and the whole plot of the movie
what
is
did I just say?
to...
With an exception of some kind of manly men movie. But The Searchers is very liberal at the end. He doesn't.
Well, he wants to kill her.
But he doesn't. He doesn't.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, that character. This is an interesting observation. If you're a conservative, do you watch A Few Good Men and interpret Jack Nicholson as the hero of the story?
I don't know if conservatives do watch it, or I'm sure they do, but I don't know how much analysis is really going on there.
But I'm saying, like, that
yes,
character...
I mean, Sorkin's such a genius that, of course, we get both sides of it. We believe him when he talks about the wall and all these things.
Right. I think that's the best, whether it's All in the Family or A Few Good Men, anything like that, right? The best entertainment is the one that explores both sides, doesn't use either one as a cartoon.
Yeah, no, of course. But it's
right?
Always from, if you are going to explore both sides, you have to have an ability to understand the intellectual underpinnings and the emotions of that other side. And when it's the right-wing dogmatic, we're just making stuff for people who hate Disney, they're not going to be able to do it. The Disney stuff works because of how it touches your heart. And if it's those Pixar movies, that's how they all work. And if you're not open to that, they're just going to make drivel. They're going to make all those faith-based movies. They're the worst movies ever. They're all bad.
How do you feel then about, I know that, I forget who it was, but a right-wing journalist or reporter or something got their hands on some memoranda from Disney where some of their creatives were very clear about wanting to incorporate more diverse like LGBT characters and themes into, Disney entertainment. They would point to that and go, see, proof of the conspiracy that they're trying to turn our kids gay.
No, I don't care about that. It's
So you would think that's fine, because it's like Disney is trying to be more diverse and trying to like say to, those young children who are going through that, it's okay.
well, it's a great source for story. I mean, the outcast, the underdog. I mean, these are always the best stories.
Yes, right. And I guess it's a question of like,
I mean, it's about how hard it must be so hard to be gay.
It's less so now probably than 20, 30 years ago, right? But it's but there is a whole part of America who here, I have a friend who is in the business, and his son came out as a teenager, and he's like me, Italian guy, grew up in the East Coast, and didn't have a lot of gay relatives, and suddenly his son is gay. I'm like, was it a challenge to you to kind of like, figure out how to teach him about the birds and the bees, because it's like such a different version of the birds and the bees, and it's just like I figured it out, because you have to, because it's like, it's my son and I love him and I got to figure it out. It's like, I don't have personal experience with it, but it's like I'm trying to figure out how to do the best job that I can to say it's okay. And, obviously I want to keep the lines of communication open, but that's not every family. Obviously there's tons of families who basically like, I have no son, just completely spurn.
Well, it's sad. It's very
their
sad.
children. Right. So you're right. Those stories, the underdog stories, to bring it back to screenwriting again, everybody loves an underdog story. Nobody wants to see the story that's just about the cool guy. It's like, the cool guy is sometimes the bully.
Supposedly Trump and his wife used to go to the US Open and cheer for the person who was winning. It's like the worst human being in the history of humanity. He is but if you heard about his childhood with his parents, right. I don't need to go down that tangent, but
well, that's how is a villain created, right? The villain is created by, trauma and by misbehavior and mistreatment. And that's sometimes you tell those stories, and those stories are just as interesting, right?
Yeah.
Well,
we're almost done with our second 40 minutes, so I guess we should wrap it up.
This has definitely been interesting, ladies and gentlemen. A little sort of glimpse.
I know. I'm wondering, like, what kind of time bomb did I just throw out there to blow up my career by something I said on YouTube that 30 people are going to watch?
But I will say this: I grew up in an apolitical household. We didn't talk about politics at all. My first vote for president was Ronald Reagan in 1984. Because I was a young college student, and it took me some time too to sort of figure out who I was, and what my values were. And my parents, who were apolitical, who never talked about politics, very late in their lives, my dad listened to Rush Limbaugh and Michael Savage and watched Fox News. He lived in South Florida. My dad was an entertainer. My dad played music. My dad was in nightclubs where there were drag acts, and there were, other people who were very diverse. So he grew up in that. He didn't think anything of it. But for whatever reason, as he got older and as he started being exposed to, as we were talking about, these kinds of programs, I guess it started to affect him and my mother in ways that created a kind of a rift. This is a common story, by the way, amongst a lot of people with their parents. And I was like, I don't know what to do. At a certain point, when they got older and I got older, I was like, we're like losing our common ground here. And I had to be very careful about the conversations that I have, because I love my parents. Obviously, I love my parents. But like, it was a different generation. And the same thing is now happening to the Frank Langellas, to bring it back to that. The Frank Langellas of the world, who are looking out going like, yeah, things are changing in the culture. And, you either are somebody who's sympathetic towards those changes, or you're somebody who's going to stand and say stop. And there's people all along the spectrum. But I don't know. I vote for empathy. I vote for sympathy. I want to even understand the other side. because those are people in the country too. And,
And we'll need more empathy when we're all eating Soylent Green in 30 years.
Soylent Green. Well, and on that note, this was fun. It's always fun.
We should have a politics talk show. We don't we can't help screenwriters.
We'll do a spin-off next, but I'm glad you guys are watching. This is a lot of fun. Again, if you have any topics, any specific questions, please put it in the comments on YouTube. We'll get to it. Would love to hear what you want to talk about.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Charlie.
All right. Very good. Take care, guys. Bye.